Sparks that I don't remember. Hold and let it shine. Fixing stars to fade away. Fixing stars to fade away. Fixing stars to fade away.
Hello, dear friends of Kabbalah International. We are once again talking with Mario Sabán.
Shalom, Nacho. How are you?
Shalom. Very well. Very happy to be here with you. Today we are going to make a second chapter dedicated to Abraham Abulafia, but this time focusing a little more on the thought of this Kabbalist from Sepharad. Last time we dealt with his biography, and today we will go a little bit deeper into his thought, if that's okay with you.
Abulafia's thinking is very complex because he has books. He has several books that were originally in manuscript form and remained so until the year 2000. When I say that it is complex, I would also add that it is varied. It has many variations in its methods. Let's give an example of this. He was the first to bring meditation to the Kabbalah, clearly confronting the theosophical Kabbalah that existed at that time, and then he begins to put the subject at the center of the religious question, at the center of the spiritual question. So he understood that a person with a meditation on the names of God could get to connect with the divinity. So, first methods, the breathing methods that he works in meditation with the vocalization of the names of God and the permutation of the vowels in all the names of God. They are very complex systems. What he proposes is that these names of God are vehicles for changing the level of consciousness, allowing the soul to be elevated and connect. Another method he proposed, which was very common in Abulafia's teachings, is tziruf, the permutation, where the alphabet is understood in a circular way. To get from the aleph to the middle of the alphabet, and then from the middle of the alphabet, let's say from the end of the alphabet to the middle, and show that there were two forces that we could call the negative and the positive, represented by the Hebrew letters, that had to function in a circular way. For Abulafia, there is a relationship between the last letter and the first letter of the alphabet, and so on. And he paired these letters because he understood that the divergence between the aleph and the tav, between the first and the last letters, meant that the tav was the aleph in a different reversed position. Consequently, by joining the aleph and the tav, first and last letters, and with all the letters of the Hebrew alphabet, he created combinations of energy, where he took the +5 and the -5, the +6 and the -6, and he was joining them. That is why I say that it is very complex, because it is a situation, a circular explanation. And that circularity leads us to numerology, and numerology leads us to the analysis of many of the biblical texts, to pass them to numerology, to transfer them, and examine their energetic potency. He worked with energy based on the numerical values assigned to each letter, utilizing various permutation systems of the letters themselves. Additionally, he explored the theme of colors. For example, he would take the tetragrammaton and painted it in a color, and the frequency of that color gave a frequency to his own soul, a frequency of energy. So, as you can see, Abulafia is one of the most advanced and complex practical Kabbalists. Today, the leading specialist on Abulafia is Georges Elahi in France. He is not a specialist of Abulafia's study, because of Abulafia's study is Moshe Idel from the University of Jerusalem. I am not referring to an academic specialist, but to a practical Kabbalist in terms of Abulafia's teachings, which is Georges Elahi. In our environment, Eduardo Madirolas is a prominent figure, having been a significant practitioner of meditating on the names of God and the associated head positions for many years. Therefore, studying Abulafia directly can be quite complicated for students. To truly study Abulafia, not just to meditate on it, you need to understand Hebrew, because unlike other Kabbalists who perform psychological analysis, as is the case of Moshe Cordovero, or cosmogonic, as in the case of Isaac Luria, in Abulafia the analysis is of the language directly, of the Hebrew language. So to study Abulafia without knowing Hebrew is impossible, because in fact, when you are reading the text in Hebrew, you are realizing of how he uses the text in terms of numerology, in terms of the position of the letters, and you have to see this in Hebrew directly, because you translate it into another language and you can't see it. So it is disclosed in his thinking by scholars like Edel, but in its depth, the limitation for those studying Kabbalah without knowing Hebrew is significant, because in Abulafia's system, knowledge of the Hebrew language is essential due to the specific movements and permutations of the letters. You can't simply substitute Aleph for A and Bet for B and then interchange them without understanding how they function in the original context. You have to understand it in the change of the Hebrew letters.
Emphasizing the methodology he used in organizing the study, it is interesting to reflect on its complementarity to spatio-temporal rational thinking, which is linear, and the circular thinking you mentioned, which is more aligned with intuitive thought.
That's right. In fact, in Kabbalah, we represent intuition at the level of wisdom with a circle, and Binah, which represents rational intelligence, with a square. And you can live with that square inside the circle, so the circle gives movement to the square. Because that circle is moving and the square is inside, or you can have an inverse life, putting that circle inside a square, and then the circle cannot move because it is fixed inside a square. What Abulafia did is an excellent balance between the rational and the intuitive, because let's remember that as a young man, he came from the rational field. He was a pro-Maimonides, a fervent admirer and follower of the teachings of Maimonides. When he reads the Guide for the Perplexed, he says, "Oh, in the Guide for the Perplexed, I find the basis of one of the mysteries of the Kabbalah, which is the Maaseh Bereshit." Abulafia, for example, developed a type of meditation that was very advanced for his time, known as the unfolding of the Neshama. This practice involves seeing oneself and conversing with one's own soul. In other words, he claimed that he could converse with his soul, which he regarded as his guide. Besides having other guides, his own soul was. So of course, imagine, right? Unfolding, permutation, circularity of thought, meditations with head movements and breathing, meditations with the colors in the names of God. He was very multifaceted and exceptionally profound, making it quite challenging to fully understand him when reading his work. It is not easy because he is very cryptic. Moreover, for example, in some of his works he reaches a point where he says, "I'm not going to explain this subject, because with what I have explained, the listener should already understand," and leaves you like that. And you say, "I didn't understand anything." Here, then you mean that I am not Abulafia's understanding. You read it again? You read it again. It happened to me with Abulafia. I read it again, I don't understand. I read it again, I don't understand, because I am reading it. When I stopped reading it, that text, and I started to see the letters, I began to discover numerology, and I find a numerological sense, and that's when I understood it. In other words, Abulafia's challenge is that his teachings are cryptic. He deliberately conceals their meaning. When you try to understand the literal text, it leads you nowhere, because the literal is designed only to serve the hidden. It's only when you stop reading it literally that... When you stop reading it and start visualizing it, you begin to understand the secrets that Abulafia is telling you in that paragraph. Of course, to see it this way permanently is to be very alert, always, of what he is writing, in terms of the symbolism of the numerology, because he is not giving you a conceptual explanation. Sometimes yes, sometimes no, but not when it is the most cryptic.
Also, I would like if you could mention something about the 4 levels of energetic depth of the letters. The level of the written letter, the thought, the cosmogonic, and the invisible letter.
Of course, we are at the level of the Peshat, at the literal level. At the level of the reading of the text of the Torah, of any text, a direct understanding we could call it, then there is the level of the Remez, which would be the allusion, what the text can say, but also in a more direct way. The Drash, which is already a deeper interpretation of what is happening, that is the 3rd level, and what he called the invisible letters, which is the Sod, the secret of the text. What happens is that to those 4, he added 3 more. He added Sod of Sod, Sod of Sod of Sod, and Sod of Sod of Sod of Sod. He added 5th, 6th, and 7th levels. It means that for him, there is even a 7th level of secret within each of the secrets. Sometimes one wonders if he wrote showing several overlapping secrets, hidden secrets, because this is what he wants to tell you. If he has so many levels of secrets, that there is a lot of juxtaposition of secrets.
The secret of the secret.
The secret of the secret of the secret of the secret, 4 times.
The 4 levels.
The secret of the secret of the secret of the secret.
So the 4 levels of depth are repeated. Thank you, Mario.
A pleasure.